Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Prairie Podcast. My name is Andrew Weeb. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Wherever you're listening to us from, whether that's from Three Hills across Canada, maybe it's somewhere in the world internationally listening in, you're welcome here. We're so excited to have you join us today. We've got a wonderful guest with us, Jaynie Dyck. She wrote a really excellent paper. If I remember correctly, you actually won an award for this paper.
I did,
You did?
yes.
I won't make you brag, but I think that did happen there. So we're excited to dive into this. It's an excellent topic, and we'll talk about the topic in a little bit. But first, let's talk about you. I'm curious if you could introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us who you are, what you're doing at Prairie. Maybe give us some background into the person that wrote this paper.
Sure. Well, like you said, I'm Janie, and I'm in my fourth year of business, and then I took a concentration in outdoor leadership, which is really cool to have the mix of the two. And yeah, I'm from Lamont, Alberta, which is a small town, and we grew up as dairy farmers. So just a very close knit community
hmm
kind of
Certainly,
upbringing.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and I think you that your kind of your background influences a little bit of your paper, but I'll let you talk about that. Uh, you wrote a paper on the theology of food and fellowship. Would that be
Mhm.
correct in stating? And so I'm curious if you could give us what's the general outlook of your paper? Kind of what was the goal? What are you trying to talk about generally? And maybe even give us some background into why you wrote about it.
Mm. So my paper was about food and fellowship, pretty simply. Um, it's about how we can, as Christians, invite other believers in to love one another, create a sense of belonging, and build relationship with each other. Um, yeah, I since my first year being here, I'm in my fourth year
hmm
now. I have really felt the Lord kind of put this passion in my heart to provide for people through food and fellowship. Um, I love to bake. I love to cook. I love all those things, but I more than that, I love sharing that with people, and I really, really enjoy, like, the fellowship that happens over a meal, and so I don't remember when I decided this is what I was gonna write my paper on, but I remember I wrote it down and in our, like, sign-up sheet for what we had to do, and then over time, like in the last semester, I've just been like reaffirmed that that was what I was supposed to be doing through a
hmm
few different things. And yeah, I just found a lot of passion in writing it. And I read it over afterwards and it's like, wow, this is like really what God has really been teaching me these last 4 years.
hmm
Um, yeah.
That's really cool. Well, talking about meals, and you talk a lot about, just as you have right now, your love for food, hospitality, fellowship, all of that. I'm curious if a meal comes to mind as one of your favorites.
Mm.
I'm curious if something, one of those stories jumps out.
What I've noticed is that there's no particular meal that jumps out. It's like a collection
Hmm.
of meals. Specifically, growing up on a dairy farm. We
Yeah.
farmed with my cousins and my uncle and my grandparents, and we would get together for every single birthday, every single holiday, everything we could think of. We just had a big celebration together,
hmm
and I think all those meals that we sat around a table together, they all kind of just mixed together, but those were always my favorites
Hmm.
because of the fellowship that we had. And
Yeah.
I will say my mom is a fantastic cook, and then all the other aunts and grandmas also.
Of course. That's a good answer to say.
Yeah.
No, but it is true, right?
Yes.
I totally agree with you. Uh, so, you know what? As you're talking about these meals and from your experiences growing up, of just that enjoyable time as family and celebrating and coming together, having your mom's cooking, and just the community that provided. I think that creates a good basis for where you head in your paper. One of the first areas you're looking at, though, is you want to dive into scripture because uh, what does God have to say about this? Because
Mm.
food and fellowship. I think we all agree. We like food. We like being together with food, and there is something special about it. So where did this all start? So I'm curious, when you're looking in Scripture, maybe go back to the beginning, maybe Old Testament. I think you looked there first. I'm curious, what's the foundation? Where does this all begin? Yeah,
Well, it begins in the garden,
in the garden, in the
which is
beginning.
crazy. Yes. Which I think is so cool that God created a garden for Adam and Eve. Like, it wasn't just I
Mhm.
don't know, some plants here and there, but like the garden with food. And I think it's Genesis 1:29 where like that first mention about God creating specifically food for Adam and Eve happens. It's like right in the beginning. And I love the idea of God walking with Adam and Eve
Mm,
through that. And I think I mentioned this in my paper, just how Adam and Eve weren't dependent on the food for their relationship with God,
yeah.
but God provided that. So it wasn't a worry or a stress for them. And I think as I've like we go through the Bible, when we get to the New Testament, we'll see this too. We ask that God would provide for us our daily bread when we pray the Lord's Prayer. Um, and that provision is very important. And God does see that.
Mhm.
And then if you go back again to the Israelites,
Yeah.
God provided manna for them in the desert and the quail because he knew that he needed it. And it's just been like, as I was looking, there's like time and time again that God provides. You think of like Elijah when he's
Yeah.
overworked and he needs a nap and something to eat,
Yeah.
and it's fulfilling for him. Um, yeah, and there's just so many times that God provides in that way, and I think that He has made us to prepare it in a unique way as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the Old Testament, definitely like lots of that. Um,
Exactly. There's a lot of that provision in there, which I think is interesting. And maybe we could talk about this a bit more later about the Lord's Prayer. But there's God cares about
mhm,
the physical needs that He designed us to have, which
yeah,
is interesting, right? He designed us to need food, and it's interesting the way He provides food so many times, and starts in the beginning there, like you said, in the garden. You also mention a lot about kind of even just the Jewish ways of life and
mhm.
how food is wrapped up in all of it. I don't know if you got any thoughts about that.
Yeah, one of the things I looked into like the customs of like ancient Near Eastern times,
Hmm.
and one of the big ones, there's a couple pages about hospitality, and it was such an important thing. Like it, as I was reading I forget who wrote the book, but he was saying that it was so important to them at that time
Hmm.
that they would go as far to believe that like God would send angels in disguise to see if they were actually being hospitable enough and
Interesting.
like living up to the standard, which also is such a cool like it's a unique way to think. Like if I invited everybody into my home and treated them as if like Jesus was entering my home, I think there'd be a lot of love that I would show to them and
Hmm.
a different way that I would treat them than if I just like, oh, it's just another person, I guess. But if I really, really wanted to love them well, just treat them
Hmm.
like that. Um, yeah, so the Jewish did have like all these kind of customs and manners, and hospitality was a big one, but not just to give food, but then to give a place to stay and all
Hmm.
these other kind of things on it.
Yeah, in a sense, there's not just giving food for food's sake, but there's actually a deeper meaning to the offering of food to
Mhm.
the stranger or the foreigner, or to even friends and family, right? There's a bigger community unification that happens. Jumping into the New Testament, um, you know, many listeners probably, I mean, if you just think about it, how much food is mentioned throughout the Bible, but even in the New Testament, the language of food
Mhm.
um, is brought up quite a bit. So I know we talked about the Lord's Prayer a little bit, so maybe we want to start there
Mm.
and just let's talk about the language of food in the New Testament. Bread of life, Lord's Prayer, daily bread. Let's start there.
Some of my resources were saying that daily bread might just be like God's provision for everything for the day, not just the food. But there is significance in it being that they use daily bread, not like daily water. I guess
Mm,
that would be the same for like daily clothes or shelter, whatever, but daily bread.
yeah.
Um, because food was such like it's people need it
Mm,
and people can enjoy it, and God provides that. And so I found that to be super interesting as well. Jesus also calls himself the bread of life.
Yeah.
And so when we're praying that, there's kind of a double meaning there that we're praying for our provision of literal food and for Jesus in our lives. Um, which I also wanted to talk about that uh, Jesus' ministry starts with a banquet, and then in Revelation, it ends with like the banquet
Mm-hmm.
feast.
Yeah.
And Jesus' whole ministry, there's like so many meals that he partakes in, and so many parables that he uses food as like kind of a reference point. Because again, that's just something that everybody can understand, as well as like fishermen.
Yeah.
That's something they go out to fish for food, and everyone needs that. So then a lot of his parables kind of wrap around that. And I didn't realize it until I was writing the paper, but there's just so many like parables that I wanted to pull from. But I was I got to keep this very simple, so I really did just look at the first one and then the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
It's kind of set ones because I thought those were important, and then the Eucharist
Yeah.
when Jesus has his Last Supper with his disciples. Like Jesus wasn't exactly the host, but he still put himself as the host and served his disciples through washing their feet. And
Hmm.
he created like because he still like spoke to them about all these things, and he still created that sense of like building up their relationship with one another and with him, and showing them that they belonged with him, and then loving them through that. And I think, yeah, the Lord's Supper is just a very beautiful picture of that food and fellowship.
Hmm.
They didn't realize like what was to come, but he did. And so he was ready to meet with them over a meal before he went to die on the cross and then go to heaven. But
Yeah. Certainly. And I think you're starting to bring up some of these deeper themes that you really talked about is the food and the fellowship. There's always something deeper going on, both for the host and for the guest.
mhm,
Um, there's a sense of love, of belonging, of relationship that happens, and that might actually be the truer aim of food and fellowship. So maybe let's talk about that a little bit. And let's start with love. Love in food.
one of the things a story I brought up was anytime we go to a restaurant, my dad would always be like, "Yeah, the food's good, but it's nowhere near as good as your mom's cooking. She's just better than this." I was like, "Okay, like these people put their work in and like you're paying for this, but you still think my mom is the best cook in the world." Which like might be his bias, but it's also that she puts so much like love into the food she makes because she loves what she does.
Hmm.
And I think that's just so like I see it when she's making supper for us. We always sit around a table together for meals, and she always makes something new or different, and she always tries to make it um as nutritious as she can. Like it's not like it's just a can of soup and sliced cheese
Hmm.
and a grilled cheese like that, but it's like something that she really put time and energy into and trying to make it a really good meal for us. And so the love that she puts into that is seen as we're eating it, and then over the conversation at the table, um, as a family, like we all love each other. And there's times, yeah, we do argue and fight, but the typically like the conversation is out of love. And there's a lot of growing up in a Christian home, there was a lot of like, what did you learn in church today? What do you learn in school today? How can you like apply Jesus into this? And
Mm.
how can we push you to be a better Christian and a better follower of Christ?
Mhm. Exactly. You know, there's some truth to the statement, food is the way to someone's heart, or however you want to put that
Yes.
quote. I remember you mentioned the story about your now husband, um, about how that when he tried what was a scone or something,
Yeah.
and then he knew he was going to marry you, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's a true story. Food, there's something about food that pulls us in, opens us up then to give love, but also to receive that love,
Mm,
which I think you highlighted really, really well. Um, and something about that love, like you talked about, is it's an act of service.
mm,
And often was when you're serving, you need to rely on God in that as well,
mm.
right? Because it can take a lot out of you,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah. I. Sally Clarkson wrote a great
Okay.
book about the life-giving table, and she mentions that she does a lot of like table gatherings and has people over, and she began to feel burnt out, but then when she relied on God for her strength, she realized that like those muscles for hosting and for loving people through food and fellowship began to grow stronger and her
Mm.
capacity grew greater. And I think that's such a cool thing. And I hope that I can become jacked on being able to serve people
Yeah.
through food and fellowship.
Yeah.
But yes.
That that's so interesting. Maybe that's what we should all aspire to be, jacked from, serving food
Yes.
and showing love. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, something that naturally follows out of that love, and this is maybe that idea of fellowship, is the sense of belonging that can
Mhm.
happen. And I'm curious if you could talk to us a bit about, how the invitation leads to belonging and just how that translates for us.
Yeah. So one of the really cool things I found while doing my paper and in my research uh, was typically people gather over like Christmas meals or Easter meals or whatever it is. And generally they're gathering because it's Christmas and they're celebrating Christ. And so already you have that like sense of belonging that you belong as Christians together, celebrating the same meal, celebrating the same reason. But then as you're sitting there and as you have a place at the table, then you begin to really like sink into your chair and like this is actually where I belong. And as you have conversation with the people beside you, then you like make connections, you build relationship, and really just like yeah, your belonging feels very very set there.
Mhm. Certainly, and I think we've all experienced that a little bit, right? When you get invited in, and then you actually sit down in the chair, and you just look around and you see the people you're with. You start to feel like you belong, right? And
Mm,
I think that's an experience we long for.
mm,
Yeah, quite a few people long for, and food and fellowship and gathering is a great way to provide that for people because we recognize people all have needs. I think you actually talk about that a little bit, that everyone has a need, right?
mm,
But maybe that's a bit more in the aspect of relationship.
mm.
Um, so maybe I draw that distinction for us. How do we get to relationship from belonging?
Yeah. So when I was writing my paper and we had our discussion about it, I realized that the two were so connected, and I wondered if I tried to make them two separate when they actually needed to be together. Because once you feel that you belong, then you can kind of start that relationship building. So it's like a one step after the other
Mhm.
type of thing. And yeah, so over the meal, you have um, your conversations and you have like your body again is full of nutrition, but you're able to like engage in the conversation. Um, and one of my sources also is saying that when you can when you have a table, it doesn't matter like all the baggage that you're bringing with you, all the things that are on your mind, but you can leave those aside because there's only room enough on the table for the food.
Mm,
And so, yeah, so then you leave the things behind that are like overwhelming, and then you can really be vulnerable and turn to the person beside you and like have a good, honest, and trusting conversation with them. And that doesn't always happen. Like,
yeah,
it's not always going to be these deep conversations, but there is going to be like people talk at meals.
yeah.
We'll have conversation, and you build that relationship through that.
Certainly, it's very true, and one key thing I think you talked about when it comes to the relationships, even that you're building, is that it's reciprocal in the sense that you can give and they can give, and you
Hmm.
help meet each other's needs, right?
Yeah.
And the table at the
Yeah.
table, and the food kind of provides this reason to get together, or this, I
Yes.
don't know how exactly the medium by which you can do that.
Yeah.
Um, that's very interesting. You kind of close off your paper with a recipe, which I thought was interesting. It was for what, cinnamon raisin bread?
Yes.
Yes, certainly. Um, I'm just curious. I know the answer maybe a little bit, but I'm curious. Like, where does this fit in? What's the story
Yeah.
behind the cinnamon raisin bread? It's a very fascinating story. Yeah.
Yes. So one of the things that I was thinking about was that you're not always going to be like the host at a
Hmm.
meal. Like sometimes you go to people's houses. So I wanted to touch on that, but I was thinking about like what all that entails. And typically people offer to bring something. Um, and then I was also so, like, that aside, I was also thinking about sometimes you can't, like, sit down for a meal with people, and sometimes people don't want, like, a full meal, sometimes you just wanna bring something small, and so with those 2 combined, I was thinking, "Oh, like, how do we bring food to people, and how can we still build that relationship and build that fellowship
Mhm.
by bringing food, but maybe not staying for the meal?" And a friend of mine and I were taking a study break, and we were both hungry, so we went and had a slice of toast with, like, butter on it, and it really, really inspired me. I was like, "Wow, I like this bread," but it's, like, the Dempster cinnamon raisin bread. So then I was like and when you turn it over and see the ingredient list in it, it's like, "Well, maybe that all shouldn't be there." So then I went home and I was like, "How can I make this with, like, less of those weird ingredients and more just natural things?" And I found a great recipe, and I made it, and it turned out so good. And then I was like, "Wow, this just has to go in my paper, I guess. This would, like, fit in really well for the how to bring food or, like, what you can bring." Because it is really simple, and Sally Clarkson also says that once you learn how to make bread and you start bringing it, people really like it. So I think it's
People appreciate it,
yes,
yeah.
they do.
Yeah,
They
that's
do.
true, and, I think that was a great way to kinda close off the paper is that, also coming out with a practical end of it,
Mm,
right? That, you don't know where to start making bread,
yes.
right?
Yes.
It's one of the most basic foods that humans have made for many, many years, but I think that's really cool. Um, you know, I in conclusion of everything you've talked about today, and the research you've done, I'm curious, is there some way you'd like to summarize all of this? Is there maybe a last item or a last sentence you'd like to share to conclude?
Yes. Okay, I think I would end just by encouraging people to learn, like, how to love people through food and fellowship and how to, like, be able to belong, but also to create a sense of belonging for people and to really engage in relationship over meals
Hmm,
because everybody needs food and everybody wants to be loved, belong, and build relationships.
mhm. Certainly. Well, thank you so much, Janie, for sharing with us today. I think it's a wonderful paper. It's a relevant topic because we all eat,
Yes.
but what are some of the deeper themes behind that, and how can we display God's love? How can we share that belonging? How can we build these relationships that lead to further discipling? And like you mentioned, was it Sally Clarkson?
Mhm.
The sense of meeting each other's needs, and we can get off some of that baggage when we come to the table, right? So, thank you so much for sharing with us. This was a wonderful topic, and thank you everybody for listening. I hope you guys learned something new. When you eat today, maybe think about this and consider how maybe you can incorporate some of these concepts into your future hosting or guesting. I don't know what you call it when you go over to a place, but we'll say
Yes.
guesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much. If you guys want to learn more about Prairie College, you can head to www.prairie.edu. Of course, I think if you came for 4 years, you'd get a chance to take this class and you can write a theology paper on a topic of your choice as well, which would be really fun. But once again, thank you so much and thank you, Jane.
Thank you.